mean, I raced myself out here. Near to burst in with child, almost broke my ankles in my hurry, and you ain't planning to fight for another hour?
Oh, it's better I should be late. I should just show up late and miss the damn duel.
All right, we're back on Play It Forward. We got Ned Baker today. We got the filmmaker, the writer, and the director of the modern Western drama known as The Last Stand of Bobby Co. And it's a very charming piece. Before we talk about the movie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I live in Chicago. I'm a filmmaker, an educator, and a pro wrestling referee out here in Chicago.
Awesome.
Yeah, I work in indie pro wrestling. That's kind of my weird resume item, which is very fun.
That's so cool. Like Hulk Hogan body slam style?
That's right, man. Body slams, flying elbows,
Awesome.
the whole works.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm more at the independent, if Hulk Hogan, if the WWE is like your touring Broadway show, I work at like storefront theater level,
That's awesome.
in sort of urgent pro wrestling.
That's
It's a
some dedicated folk, I bet.
No doubt, no doubt. They're very dedicated folk, and there's got to be some. That's a more recent addition to my life. There's got to be some pro wrestling film coming out of me sometime in the next few
Oh,
years.
for sure. How fun, man. That
It's
is
just
that is a
music
really cool
world.
niche.
But yeah,
Um,
I come from a background in theater. I think you and I were chatting,
yeah.
before the call, I think something similar to yourself. We worked a little bit in playwriting for a time,
Mm,
um, and like in my sort of late 20s, I started to drift, not even so much away from theater as towards film. I was just
yeah.
excited about what was possible in that. And, I started making music videos because I was friends with a handful of people in bands. And I just say, can we make a video for your, like so and so song? And it's a great way
Absolutely.
to get started because you don't have to record audio. You can be sort of free spirited in terms of like how narrative or non-narrative. And it's a very forgiving like corner of film to start in, and also one in which you can be very sort of like expansive in what you want to get in the can visually. So
Hmm.
I really enjoyed that. And then I've started moving towards, I've been writing projects the whole time and like would love to, I mean, I love to keep making music videos, but thinking about more narrative projects and sort of Bobby Co was one of my first times I'd made little, honestly, very little scrappy things where, like I relied a lot on like community of people. I say I have some great actors. I have a friend who has a camera. I'm gonna drop like $200 just so people are fed, but like that's it. Other than that, we're working with like who we got and what we
Oh,
got.
yeah. Good for
Um,
you.
yeah, that was like that's a key part of my sort of like beginning, going from, the imposter syndrome world of being like, oh, I've made a few things to being like, you can call yourself a filmmaker if you're really, taking a run at it. But
Yep.
Bobby Co was the first time when I was like, let's try to actually, let's try to like put a small budget behind this thing. Let's really plan this out. Let's like make sure we've got some pros working on this and try to crank out something that was a little more just professional quality than what I've been working on before that. And the result is what you see there, The Last Stand of Bobby Co.
Cool. Thank you for that intro. I think a lot of people can relate to all of that, in terms of historical background, how they got to where they are in their journey of being a filmmaker and actually taking ownership. And The Last Stand of Bobby Co is definitely a, very um, professionally shot and edited piece of work. And, the characters in it, there's two main characters, and then there's a couple characters come on at the end.
Mhm.
And they are in the storyline, a granddaughter and her grandfather, who is an outlaw, and he's about to, get into a showdown. And this is the only family member she has, and she's pregnant, and she needs help. And it's, as a, very recent father, relatively recent, sorry, five
Right.
years now. It's,
Congrats, man. Congrats.
you need
Yeah.
a lot of people in the game here.
Yeah.
So,
Well put.
um, So it's a real thing, and it's a real thing, that she wants for her child, her child to have some idea of family. And so there's a real plea and there's a real sense of urgency for her to save him from what possibly is a showdown that may mean his life.
Hmm.
And his um take is that he's got to do kind of what a man's got to do, and it's all about justice for him. So he doesn't walk away from this easily, and so he's in this struggle of what's the right thing to do. And so that kind of positioning the context and the narrative that we're going to have, and the audience, to get an insight on it, doing the right thing, right? Doing the
Hmm.
right thing at the right time, and having even to compromise your own ideals for the sake of someone else. So, right, swallowing your pride. So
Hmm.
that's kind of the cornerstone of the piece. The first question, play it forward, is where did that narrative come from your own life, and how did you come to it and to explore it and wrestle with it?
It's a great question. And you put it, you sort of synthesize all the themes there very beautifully, man. And it's always very, I love,
Thanks, Dan.
something I love about being in conversation with filmmakers and other artists is like sometimes someone says your art back to you in a way that clarifies. I've had some real key moments in my life where somebody sort of says like, I notice how you're working with the artifice, but like with a genuine emotional heart. And I'm like, oh yeah, I wouldn't have put it in those terms, but now that you say it, that's exactly how I'm going to talk about it. So yeah, you hit on, the themes there. Um, it is like it's as you say, it's mostly a two-hander, and it has that structure of one person's got one theme and the other person's got another theme, and they just crash into each other. And it's interesting, speaking of like collaboration, because I think in early drafts, there's something I really like about the Western world. I'm kind of obsessed with Westerns, and it's a bit of it's a genre that has this sense of like antiquity around it. Like even the genre itself can feel a little quaint sometimes. But I think I can't stop generating new like Western project ideas. I got all these like ongoing, and we'll see if the world has the appetite for them, but I like them.
That's all that
And
matters.
myth making is a big part of Westerns. I mean, it's a genre that has as much or more as any other genre, like its own sense of myth, its own sense of like tropes. And so that's one of the things that Bobby, the grandfather character, is dealing with. There's this whole idea of like his legend. This is a friend of mine, and I'll tell the backstory of how we ended up with the casting and all that because it's interesting. But he's a man in his 70s, and he's at that point, the character is like he's got this whole storied background. And with an early draft of the script, it was really, I think that I leaned a lot into it was about sort of feeding his myth, sort of like doing what the legendary Bobby Coe has to do. And she's coming out with this appeal of saying, like, screw the myth. I want you to like make a choice to be like just a family person with me. Like choose the family thing over the myth thing. And we do want her theme to sort of win in the end in that conversation. Uh, but it was too one-sided. And a friend of mine, a guy by the name of Sammy Zeisel, has been a great collaborator of mine, um, he was like, I think that right now, every person who watches this is going to be like, well, she's right and he's wrong. He's doing a thing from ego, and she's doing it from a sense of like, family goodness. And it was too one-sided. And that was a great piece of feedback. And he's like, can we add more reasons why? Partly for there to be any sort of tension here where we sort of want him to have the duel. And I think we had, I don't remember exactly how, but that I adjusted the story a little bit, um where this sense of like he was avenging a wrong, he was avenging the murder of someone who had been extremely close to him. The guy who wanted to duel him was just a total bastard. We wanted to add in some layers where for me, like I love a duel in a Western. I love those scenes. and that was enough. But we wanted to make it so that even people who weren't, so there was a real tension there of wanting there to be, and it started to be more about what you said about this question of doing the right thing, which, I reacted to because I'm like, maybe that's the question of like so many movies, just how do you do the right thing? And it's in real life, it is a rocky, ambiguous, uncertain goal to try to do the right thing because you have competing priorities, you have competing, you know, areas in your life and metrics by which different actions can be considered the right thing. And so I think if you're going to create that movie, and I needed, a lot of valuable help and feedback to get there, but you want to create an idea where doing the right thing seems like an impossible choice in this moment, but then, hopefully you find some third way where it does work.
I love the idea of the different metrics, and that's something very
Hmm.
tangible. And I think, what you've brought up in terms of kind of laying the stakes for the choice to be even more difficult and not, the audience to be kind of having them want to see a duel to one hand and having justice done,
Hmm.
is certainly a point. And then the other point is certainly the place that is so attached to people can get so attached about who they think they are and in their own minds and their own legends. And, for myself, I mean, that's certainly true. There was a very poignant time where I came up against, I'm this great writer destined for something glorious.
Right.
And I hit, a wall. I could not get to where the external reality is going to validate I am the victor of my world. And
Hmm.
so being in that place is a really like poignant thing where, hey, I didn't do with my life what I thought I would do or what I thought I would be or what, you know what I mean? And who am I now? Right.
Hmm.
And here you've got this guy who maybe he did that. He became an outlaw. He's, a famous outlaw, whatever. And now he's got to turn away from that.
Hmm.
So to turn away from that sense of who you think you are and then embrace the moment, the call of the moment, right? Here she is, this pregnant moment. And she's
Hmm.
saying, you're needed in this capacity. And are you ready to serve in this capacity? That's, not easy to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it might not match the myth you told yourself as a younger person about what your whole destiny is. And it is interesting as filmmakers because, like, I mean, I think a lot of us are motivated by a sense of trying to do the right thing to change the world in a positive
Yeah.
way. We
Yeah.
are also, the way in which like ego is a desire to be, elevate to accomplish something great, even, not. I mean, maybe that's egotistical. I don't know. But yeah, I think there's a very human desire to accomplish something great. And, I wish it for you. I wish it for me. And life is going to throw roadblocks at us, and we'll see what happens to us in the long run. But also, like, I mean, you mentioned you're a family man, you're a father, and like, I think this movie, I want all these things for myself, but I also like I can tell you looking at this movie now and thinking about it, in reference to this conversation, I'm thinking about like how much just my home life, the people that are in my life, like provide a deep sense of meaning when so many other things in my life and in the world are like big question marks, big unknown variables. So I think that, and I made this movie now uh, about it was a long process because we shot it in January of 2020, and then like right as we are gonna head into post-production, like bam, we hit the pandemic. So it was stretched out. But looking back at it now, I can see that reframing of like sometimes the most urgent thing is just the people that are near us and around us is something that's on my mind. And
Mm,
I definitely don't. I mean, a short film, it has a plot and he makes a choice, but you know, I don't so much have like, here's the lesson, take it, as like, here are some of the questions that I'm thinking about. What do you think? Does this sound good? Does it feel good to you? What happens in the end? Is it, so
totally,
so I think
totally.
that, we as filmmakers are just like working through the questions that we're thinking about, the big weighty
Well,
questions.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's interesting about, talking about the art and having other people reflect the art to you. And you're like, oh yeah. And
Hmm.
looking back on your work now and in the, context of the moment, in the context of this conversation, in the context of your reflection on the work from where your, the vantage point is now, to me, something that's one of the most ripe things in terms of my relatability to the film is like, well, what is the right thing? And what is that sense of identity, the desire system for what the way we want the world to be, and then
Hmm.
the desire, and then the way the world is asking us to show up in any given
Yeah.
moment, and that being a choice, right?
Yeah.
And my experience, it's always been that if I can let go of my desire system and show up the way that I'm being requested by the moment to show up and do this right
Present.
thing,
Yeah.
my that it ultimately, what I feel like I'm letting go of, what I'm losing, that thing of loss becomes an expansive feeling. Like my
Hmm.
awareness, my personhood is great. I no longer need to be acknowledged as a bookshelf commodity,
Right.
to validate my sense of beingness. And
Yeah.
that's liberating, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
So
I think you put that well. That's the kind of thing that I want in that last moment. It's funny to look back, I'm sure every film of yours that you look at, you watch and you go, "Ah, tweak that a little bit." Like I think that some of these last moments in the film, like even just the last shot where they're sitting and the sort of internal release is now expanded by this unbelievably dramatic like southwest sunset that we happened to get on the one day we had an opportunity to get it. Um, I wish I let that ride a little bit longer. Cuts to credits, and I wish I just stayed in that because
mm,
expansive again. What you're saying back, like that's exactly the word. I completely resonate with what you're saying about that transition. You let some part of yourself go, but it ends up being expansive. And yeah, that is a
yeah.
totally resonant way of interpreting the way that this film wraps up.
So let me ask you, how do we do that? How do we do that thing?
Gosh, I mean the president, you talked about the president. I think the
Yeah,
president is a great thing to be trying to pay attention to
yeah, yeah,
what is going on for you like in your life. Like I mean even down to literally like the literal present moment, but
yeah.
also um try to let overall your present circumstances have at least as much weight or more than the preconceptions you might have been carrying around for years and years. I mean, those are helpful. It's good to have like it's good to make plans. It's good to set objectives. But to be responsive to the present moment. But I'm not a guru, man. I don't know,
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. That's
I'm on that journey
beautiful.
as much as
Yep,
anybody else,
yep,
right?
yep, yep. We're all, putting the pieces together here together.
Hmm. Yeah,
Thanks, Ned.
totally.
Since you've made the film, last question, play it forward. How have you changed as a person?
Whoa, since I've made the film, how have I changed as a person? Um, I mean, it's funny, so like I'm talking about, particularly with sort of the timeline of this and it being something that actually started, kind of marked the beginning of the pandemic chronologically, and then was a few years in completion. Um, and had little, I did kind of my first real film festival visit with it. The Santa Fe Film Festival is where I went with it. I did some other like great other film festivals, but that was one that was really impactful where I traveled to, and that was my first time experiencing that. So it's funny to now have a conversation like this where I feel like I am seeing with clarity some of those issues that I was just starting to tap into instinctively when writing. I think that's probably a thing that a lot of artists experience, which is your art is kind of like you channel some of the stuff you barely even know what you're thinking about and feeling about from a place of instinct. And then if you look at that art 4 years later, you're like, well, it's very easy for me to see it in that context. One of them being the context of I think one of the chief ones being the context of balancing what you want to do like out in the world and what you want to be and be seen as out in the world with like what is presently and intimately close to you and available to you and maybe more important. I mean, I think also as an artist, it makes me think about my like desire to explore genre. At the time, I wouldn't have identified as a guy who was particularly interested in genre, but
Sounds like a pronoun. Yeah.
yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, genre slash,
Right.
yeah.
Western
Um,
or
right. But now I definitely see my own work in that light as being someone who's very interested in like Western tropes, noir tropes, fantasy tropes, that sort of things. Um, and yeah, so I definitely have an evolving relationship with myself as an artist and with the art that I want to make. Um, it's hard for me to say that I, see myself with clarity in the present moment, I feel.
yep.
But
That's beautiful, man. Because
mm,
what I hear you saying very clearly is getting to know yourself better. I've gotten to know who I am better, and what a wonderful, important thing that is.
yeah, lifelong process for
For
sure.
sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Ned Baker, The Last Stand of Bobby Coat. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for being so generous, brother. Um, all blessings. Look forward to next time. Look forward to the next film. And everybody on Play It Forward, we're out. Till next time.
There you go.
Peace.
Cheers.
All right.
Peace.